D&D is not a low fantasy system. It's a game where a bard might try to seduce a dragon using jazz hands and a lute solo. But that doesn't mean you can't run a grounded, gritty, low magic story. If you want your low fantasy D&D game to feel low fantasy, the first thing you need to fix isn't the rules, it's the world. Magic's not gone, it's just rare, terrifying, and taboo. And the secret to actually doing it is getting your players to help you, getting them to be excited about not being dragon-seducing bards. Welcome to Mystic Arts, where we are still sad about missing Gen Con. My name is Daði, I'm a professional writer and director, and I've been DMing for over 10 years. If you're thinking about making a low magic setting, doing low fantasy in D&D, your gut might immediately jump to adding in loads of third-party content or making homebrew systems. But before you do any of that, think about the setting just a little bit. Because if you lay your groundwork well with the setting, you might get yourself halfway there. I think fundamental to any low fantasy setting is the presence of familiar norms and mundane crises. Things like famine, disease, economics, politics, or warfare. Make the normal people in your normal-ish world care about normal-ish things. Wars to avoid, economies that are struggling, like trade routes, guilds, inflation. You can lean on real historical scenarios to serve as a mundane story engine for your world. For me, it's been mercantilism, colonialism, imperialism, any of the isms really. Recently, it's been Cold War era politics. I'll literally go read pages of historical events and then put them in my game, like the American Civil War, Balkanization, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the French Revolution, the October Revolution, and the Wild West. Then I mix and match, change the names, and intermingle these things until my players don't know what's up or down. They just know the stakes feel like something that might have happened in the real world. This might seem obvious to some of you, but if you're watching this video and your experience of D&D is adventures like Tomb of Annihilation, where a lich creates a god-making machine that sucks the life force out of everyone in reality, well, you might not realize that you don't have to do that. You can make the enemy be capitalism. Brunley Mulligan does that for a few seasons of Dimension 20 every year. You control the world, so you can make the world mundane. If you do that, your players might still choose to be sorcerers and bards and clerics. And you might then think they don't fit with the rest. And you're correct, they don't. But you can lean into that discrepancy. When the sorcerer casts Fireball, it might inspire terror in the locals. And when the cleric heals the sick and wounded, it's a miracle. You can just let your players be miracle workers. You can also control the narrative around magic. You can make it taboo to cast magic. That's not an original idea. I see loads of posts from DMs and players online talking about that idea, and it's often met with friction. Typically because there was somewhere along the way a communication issue. The DM decided that magic was taboo and just never told the players? Bad DM. No, communicate. But if you do communicate it, it can be powerful. When Alton the Wizard casts Prestidigitation to clean his clothes, an NPC might look over in shock. Her heart rate shoots up as she says, "Don't cast spells around me, wizard." And when pressed on it, the NPC might say, "I was there when the Evoker Supreme brought the sky down onto City Plaza. I watched as meteors rained from the square and my fellow protesters were killed outside the gates of the Obsidian Palace." Whoa, there's lore, taboo. This sort of stuff is great because A, it tells us that magic is taboo, and B, it tells us about a historical event, and C, it creates a bad guy. There was a wizard who cast Meteor Swarm on a group of protesters. Which historical event did I steal that one from? Comment below for a cookie. But if a wizard cast Meteor Swarm in that historical event, is this setting still low fantasy? Well, maybe not. It's a taste thing, right? Maybe for you, spells like Meteor Swarm shouldn't exist at all in a low fantasy setting. Maybe that's just tickling your funny bone in a way that it doesn't tickle mine. But what defines low fantasy for me is the fact that one wizard cast Meteor Swarm. The story doesn't go on to say, and then all the wizard protesters cast Counterspell and disintegrated the flying wizard, and then everyone cast spells and it was a huge battle. No, the protesters were ordinary. The emperor in the palace was ordinary. The wizard was like a mega weapon. He was unique, and as a result, terrifying. Let's get back to that idea about third-party content. Because I dismissed it earlier to talk about the setting, but I think it's because I think the setting can be very telling about taste. Because once you've decided what low fantasy means to you, whether spells like Meteor Swarm exist at all or not, then you can look at how to bring out that element at your table, that third-party element, because you definitely can. In the core rulebooks of D&D, there is only, like 40 pages in here that aren't specific to character customization. The core system is so dead simple that you can do anything to it. Roll 1d20, add a number. There's basic stats, skills, and actions. There's equipment, feats, and conditions, and really, that's about it. The rest is more specific, and you, as the DM, if your players are up for it, can start messing around with that stuff a little. You can find the kind of third-party stuff that makes your vision come together and play with it. Like the sponsor of today's video, Injuries and Vile Deeds. It features monsters, backgrounds, NPCs, and feats and more to make your combat grittier and bloodier. There's also nasty subclasses in here like the Champion of Pain Fighter. The artwork in here is gorgeously gory and just the right kind of gross. If you're a fan of the combat aesthetics in The Witcher, or the kill animations in God of War, Shadow of Mordor, Injuries and Vile Deeds will be a perfect addition to your game. Link below. My main D&D game that I've been running for about a year now is about a group of regular people. A former mayor, a police officer, a criminal, a member of parliament, a lawyer, a construction worker, a journalist. But it's not like it's Call of Cthulhu, they do have classes. Scholar, wizard, rogue, summoner, ranger, warlord, and monk. They're venturing into the dangerous Elmwood, searching for lost settlers, mapping the forest, and all that kind of stuff, and it's got a lot of dungeon crawling and hex crawling. So, it's still D&D. Through this adventure so far, they've been dealing with the struggle of being ordinary people placed in extraordinary circumstances. The things in the forest have powerful magic, and they are terrifying because of it. To my players, it seems like the stuff going on in the forest is some eldritch, esoteric nonsense, and the fate of the world might just rest on it. But the magic feels terrifying. I'd say it feels very low fantasy, but we're playing this in D&D, so how did I do it? First, I accepted the fact that since I wanted to run D&D, and not some other system, I couldn't go too far. This was set in the same world as all my other D&D campaigns after all. I wanted to play a game with dragons and owlbears, so I contrived an excuse to have that in my low fantasy game. I said civilization is like Regency-era England in terms of tech and society. But we're out in the boonies, here in Loggers County, where it's more like the Wild West. It's a frontier where laws are written in blood, and nobody from the cities cares about this place because there's no money to be made here, and nobody important lives here. So nobody knows about the crazy stuff in the forest. It just doesn't matter. And then I had their backstories and their one-on-one sessions we played take place largely in civilized lands where things like the law or money or politics dominated their lives. And when they arrived out in the boonies and were surprised to learn there are owlbears and ankegs out here, that was the moment it clicked for me. It was a contrived reason, sure, but it was simple and elegant. Outside of the forest is the normal world. Inside of the forest, a whole world of danger and fantasy that nobody seems to care about since it's only bothering the rustics who live here. But it wasn't just that. I set limits before the campaign began. We had just killed Tiamat in a previous adventure, and when that session was done, a little bit earlier than expected, since, all we did that night was one, albeit long, fight. At the end of it, I gave him a handout about the next campaign, about this new Loggers County campaign, and in it, I suggested they try to pick classes that didn't have spellcasting. At least most of them. I was okay with like 2 or 3 spellcasters out of 7 players. I suggested they play from a list of species I thought would fit in with the rest of the setting, but I didn't put any hard limit. I left it open enough, saying that anyone wanting to stray from these suggestions could just come and talk to me. I trusted them enough to do that, and my players largely agreed. There was a ranger, there was someone who eventually became an arcane trickster, and one player picked wizard, with the understanding that he'd be playing the wizard. The very archetypical mage stuff, which made him somehow feel lower fantasy by leaning into the classic style of a wizard studying spells. He felt more like a scientist than a sorcerer at the table. I've also been less lenient on these kinds of restrictions. Like in the adventure I prepared on stream, Operation Short Fuse, I explicitly invited players with the understanding that they were not allowed to play any character that got any form of spellcasting. That was a line I didn't budge on. Playing was contingent on following it. I felt okay doing that since it was a short campaign, only 10 sessions or fewer. But with my main game, I wanted to make sure that players could love their characters long term. So I decided to be more lenient. You gotta play this stuff by ear. But I also gave them a carrot, not just a stick. Yes, I limited their options from the player's handbook, but I wanted them on my side. So I offered them to pick from a selection of normally somewhat off-limits third-party options. I said they could, if they wanted to, pick one of 2 classes from Benjamin Huffman, the Scholar or the Pugilist. They could pick Taran Pound's Vanguard, or obviously the Mystic Arts Warlord. Link for these classes in the description. One of them wanted to play a Summoner, something we had back in Pathfinder, but we didn't have one for 5th edition, so we decided to make one. We're still working on it, but we'll let you know whenever we finish. This way, I got them excited to choose from newly unavailable player options. It's a lot harder being bummed that they can't all be sorcerers or bards when they could instead be excited about being some class they normally don't get to play, and in the case of many of them, classes they might not have heard of. And these classes were all lower fantasy, no spellcasting, more martial or intelligence based. Same for the additional subclasses. In Injuries and Vile Deeds, your players might be tickled pink by the idea of playing a Path of the Blood Reaver Barbarian. I also invited my players to use the FIREARM rules, available on our Patreon, which many of them jumped on. Suddenly, they were picking homebrew martial classes, shooting guns, and that was new and exciting, but still familiar, since it was the same D&D campaign setting we've been playing in for a decade. Which is kind of the key here. You gotta get your players on board. If the appeal of a low fantasy game appeals only to you, then it shouldn't be surprising when they don't want to play. You are presenting a game, and they might just opt out. That's fair, that's their prerogative as a player. So if you want them to opt in, give them a carrot. Fun new stuff to get excited about. Get them invested and engaged by offering new options for them. And maybe you might realize as you're watching this video that a couple of homebrew classes aren't going to be enough to create the low fantasy campaign you're thinking about. Maybe you just don't want owlbears and dragons. Maybe you're thinking about playing the wrong game. I hate it when people tell me that, since I keep coming back to this damn game. I love it, but there's a plethora of systems that don't feature owlbears, and they might work way better in a sort of low to no fantasy setting. In order of fantasyness, I present Dragonbane, the One Ring 5e version. There is Pendragon, and finally, Call of Cthulhu. Maybe that's more your speed? I don't know, I'm just a humble advisor. The thing that makes RPGs so wonderful is that at its core, it's just a conversation between players and game masters. And systems are typically very modular, malleable, and adjustable. Go play with them. Try new ones, take the ones you like and stick them into your game, to the game you're playing. Alternatively, you could bounce from RPG to RPG and maybe you'll discover your opinions on what you want are too developed to be influenced by what some other game designer thought was cool. Then you gotta go mix and match because you've just discovered that you have an artistic vision. And if you kill it, you're a murderer. Go chase your artistic vision. Bring your players to the board by pitching it and workshopping it with them, because they are your co-conspirators. Together, you're a gang. You're blessed to have RPGs as your hobby. You don't need to fight Unreal Engine to make games. It's all in your head. Just make shit up and see what happens. Build a whole vision together by mixing and matching the stuff you like. Not for this game or for that game, for your game. The one that exists at your table. And that's where we'll pick it up next time. This channel is run by me and my girlfriend. And if you want to support us directly, consider joining our Patreon. Patrons get access to our Discord, and Adept members get the Warlord, firearms, and a couple of dungeons perfectly suitable for low fantasy D&D. If you're feeling especially generous, you might like the video, comment, share, or subscribe and hit the bell to be notified when we release new videos. Until next time, keep studying the mystic arts.
Here's your low fantasy.
Off!